thanks for coming on. And I know that you wrote an amazing book about your journey, so we might talk about that a little bit later. But just to begin with, could you just tell the audience and myself a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So my name's Kay and I live in a coastal town called Morecambe, which is in Lancashire, the northwest of England. And I'm now a published author. I also am a grief mentor. So I run programs for children and young people in schools who have lost usually a parent, but it can be a grandparent or a sibling or someone significant in their lives. And that's to help them through the grieving process. I'm also a transformational coach and I'm a clinical administrator at the local hospice here in Lancaster called St. John's. So they're kind of all of my hats that I wear professionally. And then on a personal level, I'm a wife of 24 years. I've got two sons, one who turns 24 today, one is 22. And yeah, I'm a sister, a daughter, an auntie, a niece, cousin, and all of it, everything that goes with that.
Yeah. Would you like to share a bit about your brother who inspired the book and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I'm one of four siblings.
Oh, me too.
So yeah, really. So I have two older brothers, and then there's me. I'm number three, and then my younger brother Sid is the one who inspired the story, and he died 5 years ago. I do still. It's really funny. Like when you talk about questions that people ask you after somebody's died, and one of the hardest ones is that how many brothers and sisters do you have? And I can remember the first time I was asked that question, and I was floored the first time. I actually didn't know what to say, and I actually had to leave the room because it really sort of got to me. And now, 5 years on, I've got comfortable with saying I have three brothers. It doesn't matter that he's physically not here. I still have three brothers. That does not change. So he was the funny one out of the four of us. I mean, I'd claim I was funnier, but he was there was quite a gap after me. So there was like 4 years. So, people go, he was the unexpected one, which he was. And he very quickly became known as the golden child in our family. And yeah, very relaxed, very laid back, even as a child. I don't know if that's just because he was the youngest. So he just had to get used to the madness of the family. And he was very practical, I would say, like a very practical person, very private and quite shy. He would never say outwardly he was shy, but he definitely was. But most people remember him for his humour and his kindness. That was they were kind of like the standout traits for him. He was a very deep thinker, but he was quite serious. He looked serious, but we all joke that we have this in the family. We all look quite serious. So he used to say to me, "Oh, sometimes I just have to remind my face that I'm happy." And I kind of have the same problem. Like sometimes people say you look like you're kind of really focused and on a mission, and you can look really intense. And I can be intense, but often we feel very happy, but we don't look quite.
It just runs in the family.
yeah, basically, yeah. Because my parents are the same. They're exactly the same. Yeah.
Wow.
So yes, that kind of describes him.
And I really just wanted to go back to that question because I think it is quite awkward when someone asks, like for me it would be, oh, where do your parents live? Or like, they just sort of ask about my parents and then I kind of go, oh, well, my dad lives here, but and then it's that mum question. So it is a bit of an awkward question. How did you come to deciding that you still have three brothers and you weren't going to leave him out?
I think it happened gradually over time. I don't think it was like something that I just suddenly went, oh, that's what I'm going to say. I think I had to be asked that question a few times and I had to be uncomfortable with it. And I had to kind of, being uncomfortable made me ask myself, okay, well, how do I want that to look? What do I want to say? And is it all right if I say that I've got three brothers, or am I lying? You know, like I was just questioning everything about it. And then I guess this whole journey post death, and once you kind of come out of the, however long it lasts, the black hole for me was kind of like a couple of years. And once I started to come out of that, I started to think, well, I don't. In fact, I'll tell you what. There was something I heard on a podcast. Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, she was being interviewed by somebody, and she was talking about her significant loss of a partner, and she said, "I can't live without her, so I don't." And I thought, oh, that's really powerful. Because I don't have to live without him. I can keep him very much alive in my life, maybe not physically, that's clear. But in every other way, I should and can speak about him as he is, I feel he is with me all the time. I feel the parts of him that are very much like me continue. So when my sons will say, "Oh, Mum, you look just like Sid then," or "Mum, you just said that just like Sid," like that's the nicest compliment anybody can give me. Or when I talk about him and people say, "God, I can actually feel him here," like by the way you're speaking about him, I can see how close he is still to you. So I think it was just a gradual, and listening to other people's grief experiences help inspired me to think, actually, it's okay. It's fine for me to say that. And I can own that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Because I think those are the nuances that people deal with in grief, but there's no kind of there's no manual, obviously for the grief journey, but then, even those kinds of questions, how do you deal with them? I think that's something people struggle with, but we don't often talk about. So your book it's called Losing You, Finding Me. And so I wanted to sort of ask about that kind of idea of finding yourself after your brother died, and what was happening in your life when he did die, and then how did you, I guess, find yourself afterwards?
Yeah, no, it's like a massive question.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm trying to simplify it, but I
Like,
don't know.
what's the meaning of life? I feel like we're going to start that conversation, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, no, I think when Sid died, so he died 17th of February 2019. So in my life at that time, I'll go one step back. We'd lived in Australia for 10 years. So we'd lived in Adelaide, set up a life there with the boys, and that's where they'd grown up, and that's where we intended to stay. But because of Sid's illness, and this is all covered in the book, but I ended up making the decision, or we did as a family, to return to the UK at the end of 2017. So at that point in my life when Sid died, I was not in a good place at all. I probably wouldn't have said that at the time. At the time, I would have told you I was absolutely fine. But I had experienced a nervous breakdown the year before, and I was just debilitated, struggling I was in fight or flight all the time. Going to work every day was just like, I just had to get up and get on with it as best I could, until a point where I really felt like I think it was sort of irresponsible in a way, because I don't think I was in the right place to be going to work and doing what I was doing. And a month before Sid died, my husband had a elective surgical he had a surgery on his bowel, which was quite significant. And 4 days after that, he ended up contracting sepsis. And had an emergency surgery and was in intensive care. And this was like 4 weeks before my brother died. So this was
Mm.
really in his last weeks of his life. So they were two places completely separate as well. So the hospital, the hospice, and my work were all like miles and miles apart. So I was doing this
Mm.
round trip
Mm.
constantly. So yeah, it was just horrific. Then when he died, his death was quite complex. And I did find that that then caused a real shutdown. And I had to again just go into autopilot. But I've got trauma that I'm not acknowledging as trauma. And then I've got the black hole of grief that comes
Mm.
anyway, with or without trauma. And that whole year following his death, I don't really remember much about what I was doing. I know I was doing stuff. We actually were opening a restaurant and we were doing all these mad, crazy things. And my husband was not well at all. He was recovering. But I just did what I'd done my whole life, which is be strong, stay strong, carry on. Things will get better. And so it wasn't until the pandemic happened the following year and everybody was forced to stop. The pandemic, in many ways, ruined, well, lots of people's lives, but it ruined our lives financially. And there's certainly not very many things I can say that were good about the pandemic. But
Mm.
one thing I can say is it was a blessing in disguise for my recovery. Once the pandemic hit, then I was able to turn inwards and think, actually, what's going on here? How am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? I had time to sit and journal and think about what is it that I want? What is it I'm not happy with? Still lots of grief going on, lots of, I don't know, where you kind of obsess about, you hyper focus on that person that you've
Mm.
lost, and you're obsessed with the fact that they're not coming back, and you don't know how to move on. You don't know how to live your life because your entire future has just changed, and
Mm.
you don't know who. It's like you're questioning who you are and everything. Like I was questioning everything. And so I knew I'd always wanted to write a book, but that's when the first genuine, like, I need to write this book. It needs to happen. And I knew it was going to be part of my healing process.
Mm.
I don't believe anybody's ever fully healed. I really don't.
Mm.
I used to work in wound care. Seems like a weird analogy, but I worked in wound care, and when you have a wound and it heals, it only ever recovers to 80% of its original strength. And I genuinely believe that's what happens. But I've realised that's all right. It's all right to
Mm.
not be fully healed. And I feel like that 20% that doesn't go back to how it was before is almost, that part is in honour of that person that you've lost. That's okay, because that means I won't forget,
Mm.
what that meant or how that changed
Mm.
my life. So the pandemic is really when the process started happening of finding myself. And I
Mm.
started to look at different values in my life, my marriage, my habits. I just started to ask some really significant questions, and I stopped being afraid of it and
Mm.
thought, you know what, the worst has happened now. Nothing is worse for me right now than what I've just experienced, what I've witnessed. It gave me the license, if you like, to question everything. And it's, yeah, the best thing I ever did.
Mm. And you weren't working in the grief and bereavement and all the stuff that you're doing now. You weren't doing that before
Oh,
Sid died, were you? So that was all kind of part of, I guess, your journey. And because I know that everyone faces grief at some point in their life, but I'd say probably the majority don't really make a drastic change. They might experience the grief, but they kind of try and keep doing what they were doing beforehand. So it doesn't always lead to a whole range of changes in their life. And so how did you kind of come to working with people who are grieving and making those decisions? I know you just said the pandemic kind of gave you some space, but you obviously took more action after that.
Mm. Before my brother died, we talked a lot about his life and things he regretted. So
Mm,
one in particular was when he was 16, he had an opportunity to go to naval college and he didn't do it. And it was a huge regret by the time he never shared this with us until months before he died. So we
mm,
never knew his whole life that he'd regretted not going to naval college. So I felt like that was something that I thought, right, if there's regrets I've got, I need to,
mm,
look into that. And I recalled when I was around the age of 15, 16, when I left school, they said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And at the time, I wanted to be a nurse. My grandma was a nurse. My mum had wanted to be a nurse as well. And I'd worked in a nursing home, and it was kind of like one of the happiest times I can remember in a job that I enjoyed as a part-time job. And I couldn't work out why, what it was that I loved about it, but I just seemed to love helping people. But then, of course, you end up in the trap of being encouraged to get jobs that pay more money or seem more successful or seem like they've got some kind of, I don't know,
status.
you know, yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Mm,
And so I fell into that trap and sort of was chasing the money and chasing the. So I always went into jobs that were to do with healthcare, but they were often administrative so I was always kind of one step away from the direct care of a person. And it always was, frustrating because I was really good at all those jobs and people would tell me I was good at those jobs and I earned really good money and I
mm,
had a wonderful life in many ways and I traveled a lot and won trips away and so it all looked wonderful, but I wasn't fulfilled. I was only genuinely fulfilled when I was in a room with a patient and their family and I
mm,
was directly feeling part of their care. Yeah, so I sort of was reviewing that and thinking, this misalignment with the corporate world and healthcare, it just didn't feel right. So I just reviewed all of that while I was kind of reviewing every part of my life. I was like, okay, what is it then? What is it that's going to make me happy? And all I could think was, I need to get back to some direct care, direct service to other people. And after experiencing my brother's illness and then death and hospice world, which I'd never been introduced to before, I was just like, I really think that's something that I want to do. And I want to help other people who are going through what I'm going through. And I want to help them realize that there is, there's hope
mm,
at the other side of that. Now, obviously, strangely at that time, I wasn't where I'm at now. So even the fact that I had that thought, I feel like there is going to be hope at the other side of this. But I didn't dive straight into a career change. It was a very
mm,
slow process and it was very toe in the water. I'll start volunteering. I'll just do that
mm,
first to see how it feels. Because obviously it was quite scary to go back. It wasn't the hospice where my brother actually died. It was a different
mm,
hospice, which was a good thing, but to go back into that environment and be around people that were going through that, I just thought, oh, I don't know, this might actually be worse for me. But honestly, the first day I volunteered in the bereavement centre at the hospice, I was just like, this is it. This is it. I don't know what path I'm going on here, but this is the direction I need to go in. And then fast forward 2 years, I'm working there in a paid job and I'm studying counselling and I've had lots of training in grief mentorship and I'm accredited Seasons for Growth companion. And then like it just all snowballed. And I do think that when you are following the right path, things do start to slot in and you don't
mm,
actually have to try that hard. It's not that difficult. It's just aligning yourself with the right thing.
mm. So it sounds like it was not just, I guess, career change, but you were saying like you were asking a lot of questions. So there was a sort of a transformation on the maybe spiritual level or on the emotional and mental level as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Hmm. How did you go from like just asking questions to or evaluating, what was that process like? Because I think I'm very similar where yeah, I just questioned everything and it's almost like just deconstructing your whole life and your identity and everything and then sort of slowly piecing it back together in a way that's more authentic or that's more
Yeah,
genuine.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. So there's a little saying that was on, I don't know, I think it was on social media somewhere at some point, which I love and has stuck in my head. Because often when you're stuck somewhere, and it doesn't matter whether it doesn't have to be a death, it
Mm,
can be anything. You might be stuck in your marriage, you might be stuck in, there's just something where you're feeling really like your life isn't moving forward the way you want it to. And I saw this, and you get overwhelmed, and you think that the answer is you need to do more, and that there's more things you need to explore, and more things you need to add on, and it all just gets really overwhelming, so you keep being stuck because you're
mm,
so overwhelmed. And there's this little saying that I saw one day which said, if things don't add up, start subtracting. And I was
mm,
like, oh yeah, actually I just need to get rid of a lot of things, like not just material things, but I need to
mm,
get rid of a lot of things in my life that are making things confusing, that don't need to be there. I did I sought out therapy, and I do absolutely champion therapy. And I think the Americans are actually really good at this. They do have therapy as a regular thing. It's not, like here in England, I don't know. I mean, I do know a bit like what it's like in Australia, and it probably is. I think people are a bit more open-minded with therapy. But in England, it's very much if you go into therapy, there's a problem. So it's a
mm,
negative. It's like there's something wrong. We shouldn't need to go to therapy.
mm,
And I sought out a therapist. I knew I needed help. I knew I couldn't do it on my own, and I had to accept that. But one, you need money, and I knew the waiting list through the NHS, because we do have access to mental health services through the NHS, but it's a very long waiting list. And I am very much like my brother in that, and our whole family's like that. We're pretty practical. If there's a problem, we try to look for a solution. And I just started writing down. I thought, right, what can I do to help myself? So I started writing down everything that I feared. Like, even if it didn't make sense, didn't matter if it didn't make sense to anyone, not even me, just write down what it was that I was fearful of. And then started writing down what were my values. So I
mm,
think what often people miss is that they're often setting goals as such, but they're not thinking about what is important to them, what is their values in life. So I was kind of listing all these lists and comparing and thinking, well, yeah, there's no wonder I'm not feeling right, because these just aren't actually aligning. And I just started to dig into that. That was kind of the first step. And then I started to ask why about everything. So, why do I do that? Why do I behave like that when I'm in that situation? And I just started to get open to asking the difficult questions.
mm,
And I'd do that in therapy, but I'd also do that. Like, as an example, I started to question my relationship with alcohol. That was one that was definitely a part of my life that I kind of didn't understand why it had become such a part of my life. And I knew it was causing problems in my life.
mm,
Um, and I think when you've had the death of someone really close to you, it's very easy, if you already have a bit of a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol, to drink more. And it's dangerous, and it can lead you down a road you don't want to go down. So I started questioning that. So not how much, no, it wasn't about how much I drank, or whether I was an alcoholic or not, or labeling anything. It was just, yeah, why do I drink? Where does that come from? And there'd been certain behaviors that, in me that I didn't like. And I just, yeah, got honest with myself about it, which
mm,
led me to take a long break from alcohol, which changed my life
Mm.
hugely. Played a big part of transformation for me.
Mm. And how do you continue to include your brother in the things that you do and in your life? Like, how do you continue that relationship now?
It's a good question.
Or do you, maybe it's subconscious, you know, that you just sort of go along with
Yeah,
life and you know that he's there?
yeah. I don't know. I mean, how you feel with your mum, but I don't think there is a day when I don't think about him.
Mm,
So he becomes a part of every day anyway, just because of that. And I don't
mm,
think that will ever change. I think his birthday and his death day are the 2 days that I have found rituals and things that work for me now that I'm comfortable with on those days, where I feel I bring him very much to the forefront. So his birthday is very much about celebration to me of him, his life, and who he was. His death days for us as a family has become, and when I say us as a family, I mean my husband and my children, not my
mm,
brothers,
mhm,
because my brothers and my parents, and you will relate to this, I'm sure, that everyone grieves in their own way and they have their own way of coping with that. And I think that is as it should be.
yeah.
So I think we all do different things on those days, and that's fine. But as a family, we use the death day now as a reflection of the previous year. So now I say, well, on that day, I take it as an opportunity to reflect on the past year and see how far we've come and
Mm,
see what am I doing with my life that represents my brother's life not going to waste.
mm. I love that.
But yeah, so like my brother's death has turned into my second chance at life.
Mm,
And, and if I waste that, then I'm wasting his life. So
mm,
it's kind of like the biggest motivator for me is, yeah, whatever I'm doing, is this what makes life worth living? Like, or am I wasting my time? So everything I do is
mm,
like genuinely with intention. I've never lived my life on purpose as much as I do now.
mm. And you did mention your brothers and parents. Has it changed the relationship that you have with them with Sid's death? Because I guess sometimes, yeah, I think naturally it does change relationships, but what has it meant for you and your parents and brothers?
Yeah, I think it has.
Mm,
Like you're saying, I don't think it's possible for it to not
mm,
change the dynamic. My parents are, they're amazing. I think everyone feels that losing a child is the worst thing. And I don't compare grief. I'm quite passionate about saying that because there is no comparison. Grief is grief, and grief is unique to that person, and that person's relationship with the person that's died is not like anybody else's. So there's no comparison, but I think it's pretty well documented. And even just for me, the thought of losing either of my children is just unbearable to think about. So my parents are just, the fact that they're still breathing and walking the earth is to me like a testament of strength. And they are moving forward in their life in their own way at their own pace. We talk about Sid all the time. When
mm,
I'm with them, they don't not talk about him. And we do talk about how they're feeling about different aspects of grief, because I think that's the biggest thing, is to communicate about it, because otherwise you run the risk of upsetting someone by accident because you didn't realize that that would affect them. So what's okay for me might not be okay for my mum. Me looking at pictures of my brother, but my mum took a long time before she could look at pictures. So there's little things, little nuances that I think is
mm,
important. My relationship with my brothers is different. I think in many ways it's better. I think it's deeper. I don't think you can witness your brother's death together and that not be affected.
Mm.
And again, I think of what Sid would be saying to me all the time, like, you know, he would want us to be close. He wouldn't want us to be, you know. I think my middle brother's quite quiet. He doesn't talk much about. In fact, actually, neither of them do. But then I think that's. I feel very generalist when I say it's a man thing, but
Mm.
they do deal with it in a different way, and I think they are more quiet about their grief than I am. They wouldn't be writing books and talking on podcasts, and like they just would not be doing this, and that's fine. Like
Yeah.
that's totally fine. But I have the 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 sibling thing where you've shared those years with that person, and they shared years with Sid that I didn't. So
Mm.
we all, you know, I was in Australia for 10 years, so I saw him a lot less at that, you know, over that period. So we all had, and brother to brother and brother to sister is a different
Mm.
relationship as well. Particularly me being the older sister to Sid, but I'm the
Yeah.
younger sister to the other two. So it is different. It is
Mm.
different.
And how did writing the book play a part in your journey, and what would you say to people that are maybe thinking about it but think, oh no, I can't write a book, you know?
Mm.
Um,
That's exactly what I thought for years. Writing the book has been a huge part of healing. And I was very specific about writing it without any involvement from anyone else. I didn't really tell anyone outside of my husband and my children because obviously I needed to explain what I was doing. But I purposely didn't tell anybody because the outside influence would have influenced my writing.
mhm.
And my writing needed to be pure, and it was me and Sid in a room together for 2 years of me writing that book. It was like I was having a meeting with him, you know, every time I sat down to the laptop, but it wasn't a quick process. So
Mm.
the very first time I thought about writing it was actually 10 years ago. And that was when my brother found out his cancer was terminal. So when he got that terminal diagnosis, part of, you know, the grieving started for me then, really, which is really hard to do when someone's still alive. I find that even strange to reflect back on now, how hard that actually is. You don't want that person to see you grieving for them when
Mm.
they're still here. You don't want to
Mhm.
upset them, and so it is tough. Even if you're really close and you talk about everything, which we did, it's it's a tough thing to manage. But I knew that year, and I remember that year specifically because I told my husband, and he bought me a new journal, and he bought me a chair, a specific like reading and writing chair, and he put me like a note in it, a little poem to kind of inspire me to write because he
Oh.
knew that I would keep doubting myself.
Mm.
So he kept like leaving breadcrumbs of you can do it, you can do it. Anyway, I still didn't do anything until 2021. But the
Mm.
but the fact of the matter was that year was the first time I thought it's possible, it's possible. And I sat with that vision and I thought about the book and what it would look like. And I was very into manifestation and visualizing things at that time. And yeah, I just had faith that it would come at the right time. And it's really hard when people are telling you, yeah, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. You need to organically get to that point yourself, I think, before you
Mm.
can start the process. But yeah, I totally doubted myself. I thought, I don't think I've not been to uni. I don't have a writer's degree. I've not even been to a professional writer's course, but I knew I was good at writing. I've kind of always known that. But it's the old, well, what they call it in Australia, tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, nah, you can't say that you're good at something because then you're arrogant. And
Yeah.
all of those old beliefs, I had to break them down. So that all came at the same time of questioning myself, questioning what I was doing. And yeah, March 2021, so in the second lockdown is when I put pen to paper and
Mm.
started to write some chapter plans, some ideas for titles, just some loose stuff. But it was challenging because I was a perfectionist and still am
Mm.
in many ways. And I found that really hard to write. I wanted to write something that was perfect first time. And I was like, what now? I look back and think, what an idiot. That's not possible. And it wasn't until I bought books about writing memoir and got inspiration from other authors, like Anne Lamott's
Bird by Bird.
Bird by Bird,
I've got
brilliant.
to read
That,
that.
yeah, that is one of the biggest pushes I've had to go, you
Mm.
know what? Yeah, you're right, I can do that. And it gave me the permission almost to mess around with my ideas and not be so perfect. And
Mm.
Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, like that is another one that really helped in that process. But once I got going, that was it. It was like one thing happened and I was like, oh, this is good. This is good. And then I just couldn't stop. I kept getting more ideas.
Mm.
But it took 2 years to write the manuscript because 6 months, yeah, there was about 6 months I didn't write. And it's because I was writing while I was healing. And I got to a point in the book and it kind of was nice because it acted as a barometer for where I was at. So if I stopped and couldn't write, I was like, right, that's something I need to work on. What
Mm.
is the issue here? So it was when I got to the death, when I was talking about his death, I thought, I've got there's more to do here. So I went off on a retreat, and I had a lot of issues going on in my marriage at the time as well.
Mm.
And I just thought I need to go away on my own somewhere and really dig into this. Because dealing with big emotions and
Mm.
repressed stuff, you need to be in a safe place for that. You need to feel safe to get into that and really own it all. And it's ugly and it's horrible and it's not nice, but the other side of it is so worth that. So that, yeah, so then I started to make headway with those deep trapped feelings, and that was all to do with trauma of
Mm.
the last day of his life. I
Mm.
really just couldn't get past it. But that stuff is buried deep in your body, and it's hard to get to. It's hard to tap into. But once I
Mm.
did, then that was it. The last part of the book was the quickest part I've ever written because I'd released all of that stuff that was stuck in there.
Mm.
So yeah, it was definitely cathartic, definitely. And anyone who is thinking of writing, try not to think of it as writing a book. Just write
Mm.
something. Just write something daily, and for like, I don't know, either commit to a certain amount of words or commit to a certain amount of time. I usually try write for like half an hour or an hour
Mm.
in the morning early because that's the best time for me. But for others, it's late at night. For others, it's in cafes. For others, you've got to
Mm.
find your own groove with it. There is no set program of what is perfect for anybody. And I
Yeah.
played around with that.
Mm. And I know you've referred to the death a few times, and so for anyone else who had a traumatic death of their loved one and witnessed that, what were some of the things that helped you move through the challenges around that and processing it?
Yeah, when you experience something like that, the hardest part is you're stuck on repeat,
Mm.
and you're stuck on repeat on that day all the time. Even if you are doing your day-to-day thing, it's on repeat in the back of your mind and you're trying to escape it all the time. And I'm speaking very much about my own experience. Everybody's is different because there was my parents, my brothers, and my husband were in the room with me that day. So they would have experienced the same thing but different because it was from their perspective. But for me, it was absolutely shut down, so much shock, so much trauma that I just couldn't move forward. I talking to someone who is either someone close and trusted So for me, my husband was massively helpful because he actually had his own trauma. He actually found his dad dead 25 years ago. So I knew that he had experienced something similar. So I remember asking him, how do you get rid of this? Like, how do you get this constant loop out of your head? Now, he couldn't give me a particular answer, but just by the sheer fact that he'd been through something similar made me feel comforted. And knowing he would be able to listen and understand what I was saying was huge. But really, there was a combination of therapy, so talking therapy, but then I moved into more somatic type work. So EFT, so emotional freedom technique, or tapping as some people know it, that done with a therapist. So not just doing it as a self-regulation for me, but doing that with a therapist and going to that day and doing that together, that released an awful lot. I had very powerful experience at a retreat with a cacao ceremony, and that really, I mean, I think I cried for like 4 hours, and I didn't even know where it was coming from. And but it was good because I was in this safe place with these people that were
Mm.
supporting me, helping me, and I felt absolutely dreadful afterwards for a short period, but that is part of the healing. So for me, a lot of body work, yoga, a lot of somatic movement seemed to release a lot of those trapped traumatic feelings, sensations, whatever you want to call them, in my body. So there was a lot of physical work as well as
Mm.
talking as
Mm.
well.
Wow. Yeah, it takes a lot, doesn't it? It takes a lot of work to actually work through those things.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you, I guess, would like to add or to share that you haven't so far or that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so. I think the biggest mindset change for me was around non-attachment. I'm not a religious person. I'm deeply spiritual, and I tend to steal ideas from lots of different religions around the world that align with me. And non-attachment and around Buddhism practices
Mm.
is probably one of the biggest mindset changes that helped me move forward, because I realized that I needed to be whole so that I didn't need other things to fill that hole. And that was a big shift in thinking for me. And it uncovered so much around, I've been looking outside of myself to feel better through people and things and jobs and, but actually, if I just actually focus on me and what is it that I need to be fulfilled, then the rest of it will make sense. And that is genuinely where I am now, is that I'm on paper and certainly financially, I'm in the worst position I've probably been since I was 17. But I am the happiest, the most at peace. I look the best that I've ever looked, because people tell me that. And it's because
Mm.
it's coming from within. I don't need anything anymore. I'm not attached to anything. I don't need anything to make me feel better. I can feel better on my own. And that's a
Mm.
really empowering, liberating, freeing place to be. And sharing that with other people, and through the book, and I put in a practical framework that I used and developed myself in the book to help other people, because I think when you read something, yes, things land with you. Yes, you go, yeah, that I relate to that. And but I love a book where I feel like I've taken something away that I can actually
Mm.
use practically in my life that's going to help me. And it's the premise of the transformational coaching. So
Mm.
it's, yeah, that not needing anything or anyone. I don't need my husband anymore. I choose him. I want him
Mm.
in my life, but I don't need him. Don't need him to validate me anymore, which is what I used to do.
Mm. Wow, that's pretty powerful. Thanks so much for this interview and for sharing, your journey and all the things that have helped and what you're doing and everything. And so for people who I guess want to read your book, where could they find it? Or if they want to work with you or find out more about you.
Yeah, so I've got a website, so kaybackhouse.com.
Mhm.
Very easy. I'm on Instagram. You can purchase the book at Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's also on Booktopia in Australia. It is available to order through my website as well.
Mm.
Any of those, you'll be able to find it online. Yeah, so they're the places to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Now, thank you. I've loved the conversation.